biggest job in the country, I shall spend more time on the most important job, being the best husband I can to my fantastic wife Vic, who has been a rock by my side through good times and bad, and being the best dad I can to my beautiful children.
Thank you, of course, always to the House of the Euro. Many times we've been here connecting Frankfurt and Brussels, and you do such a fantastic job. So thank you very much. And today we are joined by the President of the European Central Bank, Madame Christine Lagarde. We're also joined by the Commissioner for the Economy, Valdis Dombrovskis, and of course, MEP who just came out of a session, I believe, with the President Rasmussen, walking fast around the street to make it on time. So thank you for joining us. President, perhaps to begin with you.
I come straight out of Parliament as well.
Yes.
We were together.
It's true.
And when I was preparing the session, I thought of, at the start of the year, there was this report that came out at around Davos, and this is just to set the scene, that said the president of the ECB decided enough is enough. She walked out of a dinner and she said, no more European bashing. We cannot allow him to be disrespected in this way. Months have gone by. When I look at the European leadership, increasingly they seem to be taking that line, that enough is enough and something now needs to change. What would you say is now the mood, the zeitgeist? How do you see things as we stand now halfway through the year?
Thank you, and good afternoon to all of you. We will put up together with the heat that we have currently in Brussels and in other places in Europe, and which demonstrate that we have to take climate change seriously, transition seriously, and focus our investment programs where it should be, which is the transition. So that's an aside. I do not think that the geopolitical transformation or that the threats and the lack of confidence have significantly improved in the last few months. We have seen positive development on the front of the war in the Middle East. There will be ups and downs and continuous tactics of negotiations and good news, bad news, hopefully no fake news in that respect. But I don't think that this should be the crux of the matter. It's important, but it does not reflect entirely the fact that geopolitical developments have considerably changed the environment in which we operate. And I think that in that context, it's important that the Europeans focus on what is good at home, because I believe that charity begins at home. And rather than criticize or be negative about others, we have to be positive about what we can change. The strength of the euro is one. It's not the only one. And I think that delivering on the two reports that have been so significant, meaning the Draghi report and the Letta report, to remove some of the obstacles that we impose on ourselves, should be, prime objectives going forward in continuation of the work that is being done by the Commission and for which Valdis has great responsibility.
And just to follow up quickly on that point, the reason why I mentioned the start of the year and that Davos dinner is because that episode was the first time that we saw a very senior, very powerful European official come out on the record and say, we don't have to be in places where we're not treated respectfully, and we need to stop bashing ourselves and now get to work. Now that months have gone by, and I think the weekend indicated perhaps, you were a visionary to that extent, do you get a sense that more have come on your side to say, enough with the bashing, we need to defend ourselves more in the world, but also we don't have to be in places where we don't want to be or think we're not getting good deals?
I think the momentum of looking at what we can improve ourselves has picked up speed and is broadening. So that, we can only be happy about, whether it's a matter of innovation, whether it's a matter of cloud, whether it's a matter of sovereignty, whether it's a matter of currency. I think that there are many areas where the Europeans have strength, have potential, realize it, and are prepared to deliver on it. We are excellent, by the way, and I've been around for too long, maybe, but we are excellent at being negative on ourselves. not seeing what works, not seeing positives, not seeing creativity, not seeing talent, and always commiserating. I think that time is changing a little bit, and I'm glad about it.
Commissioner, to that extent, do you get that impression too?
Well, first of all, what we see is that the world is changing. We are in a more complicated and conflictual geopolitical landscape than we used to be. And it's clear that we need to find our place in this new landscape. And for this, Europe needs to be more assertive economically, in terms of security and defense, in many other aspects. And if you look also what European Commission has put as two main priorities for this mandate, it's competitiveness of European economy and security and defense. And now, 1.5 years into the mandate, I would say those priorities are more urgent than ever. So it's important that really we work on deliver on this.
And of course, for the MEP, you're a co-legislator in a lot of these very important files. Respectfully, I find at times the European Parliament is the institution that's the most difficult to read, because there's many souls, there's many groups. Within a group, there's many different souls. And then, of course, you have your national leadership. And they also want their own elements to push through. How would you say, and there's a very important vote tomorrow, obviously, on the digital year happening, how would you read the political mood within the Parliament?
Well, I mean, you're completely right. That's a good question. I mean, sometimes you can say that being a bit more complicated to read can also be a strength for some of the actions we have to take. But on the other side, it's true, taking the vote tomorrow, for example, as a starting point for our debate. I think finally we are there yet where we will end up with a strong majority also in support of the digital euro with the reports the colleagues worked on. But yeah, no, I mean, it's a complicated time where maybe also sometimes for the parliament and for the different political groups in the parliament, we are sticking to some of those kind of positions and debates we done in the past, and where we maybe also sometimes need to be a bit faster to move on some of the issues we have to deal with, and I think especially looking on also other aspects of the geopolitical role of the euro, this is especially true, where I think that the euro had been a success history until now, but we definitely need to take some more steps, and there I think especially decision makers, like at policy level, need to do much better than we did in the past 2 or 3 years.
And you agree among yourselves at the Parliament?
I mean, like the Parliament, I mean, like there are colleagues from the far right to the far left, and I'm a Green politician, and there are a lot of others. So of course we do not agree on everything, but we also don't need to agree on everything from the start. But I think we still have a lot of colleagues and also majority in the House who would like to do some strong compromises here. And I think the vote tomorrow on the digital euro is a good example for this. It took a bit of time, but now we are there, and now there is a good compromise, I think.
And points in that direction. Well, thank you for that. Madam President, last year, and we saw it in the presentation from the ECB just here, it was a year of the great dislocations, starting with the President of the US, the tariffs. There was this idea of the Sell America trade, and there was some hope that perhaps it could see real momentum into Europe. But when we looked in the chart, the global take-up of the euro, it was sort of steady. It's what you would have expected, except it was an exceptional year in many ways. What's it going to take for a currency that appeals to many across the world to make a significant jump?
It will take time. So I know that I've been criticized because I said it's a euro moment, but I never said how long that moment would be. Okay, right? Because if you look back into history. And we've seen a move. I'm not suggesting that it's going to be the same, but the move from the sterling, which was the international currency of reserve, to the dollar took many, many, many decades. So it doesn't happen overnight. It's not as if you could, sort of check 3 or 4 boxes, and I would contend 3 in particular, and then say, okay, job done. The euro is now, or any other currency for that matter, is becoming the international reserve currency. It takes time, number one. Number two, if you look at history, no currency has been an international reserve currency or the international reserve currency unless and until it had the capacity to defend itself and to be, I'm going to be very, very blunt, to have the military might to resist counterparts. So that has to take place. There is clearly, as you've noted, an impulse on the part of member states to actually spend more money on defense and to reach the targets of whatever it is. For some it's 2%, I hope more than that. For some it's 5%, we'll see about that. But there is clearly a movement in that direction. Second, it has to also be a reliable, predictable, rule of law compliant territory. And I think that on that front, we are always criticized for being over-regulated, for being very attached to the rule of law. Well, sorry, but it's important because for people to invest, to assume that the reserve currency is going to hold, they need to have that certainty. And third, it needs to have strong fundamentals, strong economics, and that's where both the Draghi and the Letta reports come into play, and where we have to deliver to really realize the potential that the European market has to offer. And we are not there yet. So we need more time, we need more work, we need to really focus on the key three attributes that are needed.
And President, well, we're saying this in Brussels, so in a way this is, well, I'm going to try to say it delicately, but with the two reports, do you share a sense that increasingly we see in Brussels that there is a form of disappointment that it's not been implemented as fast as it could have been? I think that this year we've detected in Brussels increasingly that, the report came out almost 2 years ago. Where are the results? If you put it on a percentage scale, some would say it's less than half. That's not good enough. Is that something that you share, a form of frustration?
It's less than half, close to 50%. And I know that there are institutions
Yes.
and agencies that look and scrutinize what is completed, what is in progress and soon to be completed. And I think that's the magnitude that they come up with, 11% for one and close to 40% for the other. It's not so bad, when you look at it, because you are talking about significant changes. And I think that we have to give it to ourselves that there is progress and there is work done. When you ask Valdis, then, okay, the name is not great, because omnibus, when you say, okay, we have 5 omnibus under our belt, what does that mean? It's uncertain, except in Brussels. In the Brussels microcosm, everybody understands what an omnibus is and what is covered by the omnibus. But maybe Valdis can describe what changes are happening. And I'll just give you one reference. Both in terms of goods and services, what we have inflicted upon ourselves is the equivalent of 60% and 100% of equivalent custom tariffs. If we could move that out of the way, and I know that Valdis is working hard on that together with his colleagues, we would have, come a long way into having a much more vibrant and more attractive market. I would say, because of who I am at the moment, I would say that capital market union, or call it saving and investment unions, would be for me the top next priority, so that we can invest the savings, the monumental savings that we have in Europe.
I want to move on just in something the President just said now. When you look in history, and I realize now we're getting into a sort of intellectual debate, but the President highlighted there needs to be a hard capacity to show that you can defend yourself. And military might, I think that was the quote. Are we at a point, Commissioner, in which we can say the military might and the economic strength of the European economy matches the appeal of its currency, or is there still a gap that does not allow for that jump forward?
Well, in terms of economic strength, we know that we have our issues with competitiveness, with productivity growth, which is lagging behind other major economies already at least for 2 decades. So those are the things we need to address in economy. At the same time, we have our strengths and our appeal, which we also should be using and should be talking of in a current world, having stability, having predictability, respect for a rule of law, strong institutions, educated workforce, and so on and so forth. It also provides us with a good basis on which we can build. So now we really need to work on our competitiveness agenda And if you look at the European Commission's initiative in this regard, Competitiveness Compass, it actually heavily building on Draghi and the later reports, basically turning them into policy document, and that's what we are currently implementing, and that's also where our simplification agenda with all the omnibuses fits in. Then on defense. Defense is a new area for the EU, and it's true that we had been underspending in our defense for, again, at least 2 decades, so to say, since the collapse of Iron Curtain. One can say we were enjoying the peace dividend, but those times, unfortunately, are over. So that is changing as well, and we needed to move and act very fast to support Ukraine, to strengthen our own defense industry, defense capabilities, and we are moving fast in this regard. And so those are important prerequisites, having economic strength, being a hard power in this world. But I would also mention where President Lagarde left it with the European savings, which we need to put for productive use. That's obviously important for our competitiveness, for Savings Investments Union. But since the topic of our today's conversation is the international role of the euro, so if you look how US is fulfilling the global reserve currency role and safe haven role, without US dollar appreciating every time there is a flight to safety, it's largely because of US deep and liquid capital market, which can absorb all this flight to safety. So if we are strengthening international role of the euro, we will also be facing more of this dilemma. What happens with a real effective exchange euro in a times of flight of safety? And also from this aspect, it's paramount that we move forward with our savings and investments union. It's important to find financing for our economy, but it's also important as a stabilizing factor for a stronger international role of the euro.
And Commissioner, to that point, of course, some would argue here these debates are not necessarily new, certainly at the level of the Eurogroup. What's it going to change this year? Are you in favor of, let's say, there's coalitions of the willing? If you want to go at 6 core countries, then you should go at 6 first. What's really going to change the dynamics of it?
Okay, well, first of all, I would say the sense of urgency right now is difficult as it used to be is different as it used to be in a previous year. Just the hard reality is catching up with us. So we need to react and to act bolder, and there is realization also at the political level. So there is a, let's say, stronger political traction than it used to be to move forward with our competitiveness agenda, to move forward with our savings and investment union agenda. So we need to capitalize on that. That is one. But then, indeed, if we are again getting stuck in some of the discussions, it's better than to move forward with certain groups of countries. Maybe there are enough countries for enhanced cooperation or so. And as you know, as European Commission, we obviously prefer the community method and moving forward with the 27. But if this means not moving forward, we are willing to support also the certain groups of countries moving forward.
And that means this year, if by the end of this year you don't see meaningful changes, then enhanced cooperation should be the basis for next year?
Enhanced cooperation case is something which has to come from member states. So it's not the instrument in a sense which European Commission will be proactively driving or setting some timelines. But what we see is that also in debates among member states, there is certain willingness to move faster for a number of member states. So, and as I said, from Commission side, we will be willing to support it if that decision is taken.
Well, thank you for that. A question which perhaps may seem perhaps a too simple question, but it's really a key question in this issue. How can you work better with the Commission, the Council, take the input from the European Central Bank? How do you see this relationship with the European Parliament perhaps becoming more fluid?
Well, I mean, first of all, what I really appreciate, and I think a lot of colleagues in the Parliament have it the same way, even if we may still need to discuss some of the measures. I think the clarity also sometimes the ECB takes on providing some reports and some inputs, it's really appreciated, because what I can see is basically two main issues. First of all, the lack of ambition we can see, especially at the level of the member states. So I agree with Commissioner Dombrovskis on that this needs to change. And of course, like it's very much welcomed if there are some member states who would like to go even further than what they can agree on with all of them. And secondly, the fragmentation we still can see when it's on the capital markets and different elements of this, where my feeling still is that even if I didn't have the figures right in front of me, that I think we are moving too slowly ahead. And I'm sorry to say, but I think, of course, a lot had been done, and I also think that the Commission came up with some proposals. But I still think, having in mind what kind of moment we are in, also in history, when we can see how big the changes are, also looking on like our former partners in other parts of the world, I really think we need to speed up, and we don't have time to address some of those issues for a very, very long time. We need to start to act, and the Commission does their part in it, but they are also like just providing what they think. Most of the member states, especially one of them I know very well, will support at the end. And I'm afraid of that this won't be enough, even if the direction is the right one to take.
Well, that's the beauty of European decision making. And
I mean, I don't see it's easy. I mean, we have the same problem in Parliament. No, I mean, the report we provided worked on that on the Draghi report also is also not there where I would like to see it. But I just would like to be very honest with you and address what I think is one of the more problematic parts of the debate right now.
And President, before you said this Euro moment, it will not happen immediately, it takes time to build. You also listed a series of conditions that need to happen. Is there a single catalyst, in your view, that can inject momentum into the Euro? There was a lot of debate around the German defense spending. There was a lot of debate about just the general European spending in defense. There's still a debate that suggests the reason why this moment is not fully manifesting is because the architecture of the Euro has not been completed fully, which alludes to everything that we've said, but also the question of a safe European asset. Is there a single element that you would say could be a catalyst?
As I think I mentioned to you, that if I had to pick and choose one special reform in the left to be done work, I would say capital market union. And for the success of for the capital market union to be a success, clearly the member states will have to ask themselves the question of the safe European asset. And this is a point that has been made loud and clear in the Draghi report, in multiple reports, and which the Governing Council of the ECB has also opined upon by saying either safe European assets or a budget dimension that is such that it actually provides depth and liquidity to a European asset. They come together. Let's just agree on that.
And if the member states, and I'm sure they would love to ask you this, they said, what is your opinion about the budget as it's been presented? What would you say?
You know, I say this. I'm just a very modest president of the European Central Bank. And I look at my domain and ask myself, what can I do to move the needle, to go in that direction? And, I'm more interested now at this stage of my life in action, because you can align so many words, but where is the action? So for me, where the action is at the moment, it's what's happening tomorrow at the European Parliament, digital euro legislation, then the trilogue begins, and I hope we can come to conclusion before the end of the year, which will then, and only then, sort of enable us to go through the pilot phase that will then give rise to the ultimate rollout of the digital euro. It's not a panacea, but it's having in the digital world money, sovereign bank money that is available. And I think that that's important, number one. Number two, we need to be able to provide liquidity in this world. And for monetary policy purposes, we need to make sure that we do not create financial volatility, vulnerability that would hurt my price stability objective, as a result of which, as of the 1st of July, there will be EUREP made available. So those are repo lines that we enlarge the scope of, that we facilitate access to, and that will be open to all national central banks of the world, except the usual suspects if they are terrible and do bad things, in which case it will not be available. But otherwise it will be available in a fairly streamlined way. And that is important because, for those national central banks that have players at home that transact in euro, and there are quite a few of those who do, then they know that they have access to euro liquidity of their own through those EUREP lines. So those are two tangible things that are coming out. Are they coming out fast enough for the digital euro? I would say no. And I'll tell you why. Because when I started my mandate in 2019, I started pushing this with Fabio Panetta first, with Piero Cipollone second. And if everything works well, it will be on the market in 2029, full rollout. I will no longer be president of the ECB. It will have taken my full mandate and more to actually complete the whole project. This is where I agree with you. We take too much time. So we have to respect the rules. We have to play by the law, because this is one of the attributes of an international currency regarded as a reserve. But we need to fasten and accelerate the process.
And as you said, the liquidity lines, that was seen as critical and very much needed, and that is a reality. I wonder, President...
That's effective on July 1st. We're moving fast on that one.
And I wonder if we could just very briefly, perhaps here, explain to the audience why this was so critical, especially in the context of all those big changes that we saw around, there was a question about whether the U.S. would be prepared to weaponize almost every aspect, and that also included liquidity, by also weaponizing their central bank. Not to comment about the rest, but in the European case, why was that central? Why was it critical that it be able to provide this?
I don't think it's a response to weaponization. Right. And there is weaponization at multiple levels, but I don't want to go into that. I think it has more to do with the appetite that other national central banks have for the euro, because some of their corporates, some of their traders actually invoice and trade using euro as the currency. Hence, you need to have access to liquidity, because from our perspective, it's a financial stability issue, and it's one that we have to address. Let me mention another one, because I think that in the field of what are we doing, there's a third. So digital euro is one. The EUREP, access to liquidity is another one. The third one is probably more complicated and heavily technical, is the nuts and bolts of the system itself, the payment infrastructure. How are we linking up with other fast payment infrastructure? We have something which is called TIPS, which is fast payment system. Well, there are other regions of the world that have it. India, Brazil, countries in the Middle East. We need to work together to accelerate payment and to make sure that this is happening without friction, without excessive fees and all the rest of it. We are moving steadily and head-on with that. The same happens for the wholesale digital payment, if you will. Again, full speed ahead with something called Pontes and Appia, which will actually enable digital ledger technology to operate with our traditional system. So that's where I think that we can deliver. Put something on the table that will actually move the needle.
And Commissioner, to that extent, we've seen some deadlines and the idea of more omnibuses and the budget coming into play, and a budget that also works. I just want to ask you, from your perspective, and I know this is a delicate question politically at this time, but when you see the tools that are in place, would you argue the Commission has everything it needs to make what the President is calling for, sort of like faster action, but also the Parliament, the countries, the Council, sometimes the sense of direction is not entirely clear, but as it stands with everything that you have, is this enough? Can you lead to this Euro moment just through omnibuses? Because you know very well in Brussels the criticism is that alone will not do it.
Absolutely, and I don't think anyone is claiming that just through the omnibuses you can solve all the issues we have. Omnibuses is one part, or let's call it simplification, so that people also outside Brussels understand what we are talking about. Simplification is one part of our competitiveness agenda, but one part. There are many other parts, from needing to invest more in research and innovation, to equipping the workforce in right skills in a rapidly changing technological environment, to catching up with AI, to removing barriers to the single market, you name it. And simplification of administrative burden is an important part. If you listen to the businesses, majority of businesses are saying that this is obstacle for growth and investment in Europe, this excessive regulation, and majority of SMEs are saying that this is their main obstacle. So it's important element we need to address, but obviously it's just one element of the puzzle, and there are many other. And if we discuss again this international role of the euro, I think President Lagarde already outlined very well various work strands in which we need to move forward, and from Commission side we are determined in a sense to do our part and to make sure that we advance on all of those agendas. On the digital euro, I hope we are able to finalize legislative process still this year, so Parliament will vote tomorrow on its negotiating positions, and we can enter the trilogues, and Irish presidency is very much willing to move forward, and from Commission side we certainly will facilitate. Well, savings and investment union we already discussed. Well, the next multi-annual financial framework, again, at the leaders' level, there is a willingness to reach agreement by the end of the year. Where we are with this proposal, well, we use quite often in European Commission this phrase that we are ambitious but realistic. So I'd say our proposal is ambitious but realistic. But what we see now, a debate among member states, it's not so easy. Basically, the debate is going into direction how to reduce the size of the budget we proposed. Cypriot presidency proposed some, negotiating box with some, modest cuts in a budget, and some member states were harshly criticizing it, and to quote some colleagues there, were saying it's not a nego box, it's a no-go box. So it's not going to be easy, but obviously we also need to have the next multi-annual financial framework, because the priorities we look there on competitiveness, on also very much reinforcing this defense and security pillar are very much needed. And for once, having a deal at European level in a time which allows to properly prepare the next financial period without, the dip between the two periods, which is required for programming all the instruments or so, that certainly would also help in current circumstances.
And can I just ask you to follow up, Commissioner, is this going to be a commissioner now that from now on is going to really put economic security, not just defense, but really economic security, ensuring that there's a level playing field in all ways in Europe, now at the top of its priorities? And how is that compatible? Because sometimes there's a form of misconception about being open to the world.
Well, economic security is important part, obviously, of our overall security and resilience agenda. And actually, if we look at economic security, in our first economic security strategy, we kind of said there were three pillars: promote, protect, and partner. So partnering was one of the economic security pillars. And if you look now, we had been advancing over the last year or so very intensively our trade agenda, reaching many important trade agreements with major partners, with Mercosur, with India, with Indonesia, most recently with Australia, and so on. Because in a situation where we have complicated trading relationship with our two largest trading partners. One is US, where we see that there is a large degree of, so to say, unpredictability in the trade relations. Another is China, which is generally a difficult partner, and our trade relations are quite imbalanced. Then we need this diversification, and we achieve resilience also through this diversification. So staying open to the world is part of that agenda.
If you allow me, because it's a bit unfair on you, but you were in charge of trade and you were a great negotiator. Do you think that all these newly negotiated agreements include provisions to the effect that people in the trade agree to invoice in euros? Is that in those agreements?
Well, it's not really, neither in older or newer, because, well, trade agreements, it's not about invoicing currency, it's about tariffs and non-tariff barriers.
Invoicing. You know, when you trade services or goods, but you agree that you will invoice your services if you export, or your goods if you export your goods, that you will invoice in euros.
Well, that is something which we are trying to promote, but it's, formally speaking, not part of the trade deals in which currency the trade has to be conducted or invoiced.
Okay. And because we have to open for questions for the audience, but to pick up on that point, Madam President, because I think here you really also nailed it. The Europeans and the euro, obviously, they're trying to push for this euro moment, but so is everyone else. And there's increasing competition, and we've seen it from the BRICS countries to that extent, in which they say all of these transactions, to the point of the president, we want to do it in our currencies. The Chinese are obviously increasingly pushing their own currency. How does the euro manage this euro momentum at a time in which there's increased competition, massive fragmentation, and also the sort of new forms of payments, which seem to have an allure that maybe what they perceive as central bank money does not? How do you stay competitive where at the same time you're also seeing this massive fragmentation in the payments world?
I love your use of the word that you made, of allure. The allure of what would allege to be a currency, which it is not. Then you talk about some payment means or some assets that like to characterize themselves as currencies, which they are not. I think, you know, if you remember the slide that Fatima showed to us, where you had stability and slight uptick of the volume of national central bank reserves in euros. You have a slight decline of the US dollar as a national central bank reserve. And then you have something that pops up, which is other currencies, which is another way to say renminbi. The fact that the euro has remained stable in a world where there is strong competition and a clear push by these other currencies to have a seat at the table, in and of itself is not bad. So I'm not suggesting that this is our ambition. We need to go further, to be more attentive to all the areas where we can reinforce the role of the euro. But to your point about increased competition, yes, there is increased competition. And we have to live up to it, and we have to be attentive to the tools that are being used by some currencies that maybe are not absolutely valued where they should be, as indicated by the IMF, for instance, with undervalued other currency. And I think that matter needs to be addressed.
And does it worry you, going back to the idea of economic security, Madam President, the fact that in Europe, you know, you got to pay by the rules because you think this is also what makes us strong, but at the same time, it's not clear to me that the rest of the world is now interested in playing by the rules or maybe by our rules. How do you, again, stay competitive in a world where maybe it doesn't matter to the other big players out there? You know, the US, China, they would say you can play by your rules, but they're not my rules anymore.
Well, I think what matters is, for instance, the corporate world. Does it matter to them that a particular region, a sizable market as the European Union is, actually plays by the rules? I think it matters to them. That's what I've heard all my life, and I've spent 25 years in the private sector, and I now listen to the private sector as well. They want to know what the rules are and whether we are playing by the rules. And I think we should. We should accelerate the way in which we elaborate and forge and change the rules. But we should play by the rules, yes.
And I will open to the questions in just a second, but Commissioner, just to that point, can we ensure that there's a level playing field? Because increasingly over the past few months, certainly last week, in the context of the summit, macroeconomic imbalances, you could call it what you want. I think everyone knows what it means. But does Europe have the tools to say we can implement it? We can get to a point where we level this level playing field, or ultimately, are we even too scared to go there?
Obviously, that is a topic which is on agenda, and indeed, this question of global macroeconomic imbalances is very much discussed in the different fora, including in G7, in G20,
yes.
in other fora. Yes, I read some reportings that macroeconomic imbalances is supposedly a code word for China, but I must say it's probably a bit broader than that. Kind of the very simple formula we are using in this regard is that if we want to deal with global macroeconomic imbalances, China should spend more, US should spend less, and EU should invest more. So that's in a nutshell. So all major economies have they tasks to do. But obviously, we need to continue to pursue this and also address unfair competition where we see, and that's why we have our trade defense toolbox, which we are, I would say, increasingly deploying, because just reality requires it.
And just a final point on this, if you have a comment. And I also have a question specifically for you, because the European Parliament, before we go to the audience, you have the most direct relationship with voters, because clearly you are voted directly. Some of the things that were said in the case of, let's say, the digital euro, they were simply not in the paper. They were simply not in the proposal. There were things that simply were never said. So how do you ensure that there's a level of, forget about political honesty, but just simply factuality about some of these debates? Because as a journalist, I can testify to at least 3 things that were simply not on that paper.
I get a lot of emails right now on this issue on cash, especially in Germany, where I'm from. Like, I mean, you all know this, I guess, at least the Germans here in the room. Like, there is a misconception of that, like the digital euro is the first step to...
They will take your money.
Yeah,
and control your money,
and
yes.
that, like, everybody needs to pay digitally, and you can't use cash any longer, and especially in Germany, this is very sensitive. So I really know what you are asking about. I think there had been some issues, to be very honest, in the communication, also especially on the digital euro, where I also think that both from different institutions, but also the ECB, have to be honest about that. The communication could have been done a bit differently, but now I think it's also very important to inform and to explain that, like, this is not about about not having cash any longer, but it's about other issues, and then explain what it is about, and also with I think, like, the geopolitical dimensions we can see. I think also a lot of people, citizens, are concerned about developments we can see in our economy, but also about the dependency we have on other regions of the world. So this is also something, I think, if you have time to talk about that, then I think also a lot of people understand. I just wanted to say something else on the issue, that I think we have some weaknesses, and we definitely also need to work on the instruments. But as the President also outlined on the issue on the trade agreements, on the invoice thing, where I think there are some good ways also to address that. And for example, the idea the President just proposed to the Commissioner, we also put forward in a report. We will not vote tomorrow, but we are discussing currently in the Parliament on the global role of the euro. Things like this, it's not easy to implement or enforce, I know, but still are things where I think we can do a difference, because we have an economic strength, we have a power, we are still a very important partner, especially when it comes to trade, for a lot of regions in the world. And this is also what I think we should have in mind by discussing both trade agreements, but also ways in addressing some of the challenges we dealt with.
Commissioner, of course.
Yeah, maybe just to add a few points on this role of cash. Well, we see indeed that the role of cash is declining in the economy. Kind of share of cash payments is declining. Availability of cash is worsening. You see fewer ATMs. Acceptance is worsening. You see more signs, no cash and things like this. So that's why we decided to tackle it from the very beginning. So when we put forward a legislative proposal on a digital euro, we also put forward a legislative proposal on reinforcing the legal tender status of cash, meaning obliging euro area member states to ensure sufficient availability of cash and sufficient acceptance of cash so that it can fulfill its legal tender status. So, therefore, if anyone is still trying to claim that digital euro is there to take away cash from citizens and then Big Brother will control you, I think we have a very clear answer, no. To the contrary, we are actually reinforcing the status of cash, but that's why it is also important when we are having now this the digital euro, that we are also, at least in parallel, advancing with this legal tender of cash legislative proposal as well.
Thank you for giving me 2 seconds. One, the digital euro is not a substitute for cash. The digital euro is not programmable. The digital euro is not mandatory. The digital euro is not intrusive. I think it should be just as clear and straightforward as that, added to the legal tender that you have indicated, which is so important. To give you an idea, tomorrow, as part of my day in Frankfurt, I will be visiting the floor on which we are working on the new design of our banknotes. We've been working for the last 5 years now, on how we're going to improve the design, come up with a more attractive, palatable banknotes that will really represent Europe and to which European will relate to. So I'm doing that tomorrow. Hopefully we will have completed the process before the end of 26 and we'll be able to roll out a bit later.
In the 2027?
I don't dream of giving you such a short deadline, but I know that we will have come to, conclusion of the process of the design and the choice of the design before the end of 26.
Well, on that note, we are now going to open the floor for questions. The rules are the same. House of the Euro, just put your hand up and name and where you're representing, and then who you're addressing the question. There's, yes, the lady. Yes.
I gave you some seconds. Thank you for taking my question. I'm Elena Calistro from the European Economic and Social Committee. I understand, President Lagarde, that you don't want to get into the discussion about the MFF. Fair enough. But there is one thing there that has to do with your mandate as well. And I'm referring here to the fact that we keep on talking, of course, about the permanent safe assets. However, this MFF is basically retiring the Next Generation EU, so one of the most complex instruments we have tested so far. So what is your vision about basically withdrawing from this instrument? Thank you.
Which instrument?
Next Generation.
And the repayment, which is under heading 1.
Yeah. Well, I guess the terms of the deal amongst the member states were to complete the process in 2026. We're getting to the end of 2026, hence this RFF allocation and control over how the money is spent and for what purposes is coming to a close, which is a different question from how do you finance some of the key projects of Europe, such as defense, such as the transition, such as digitalization. That's a completely separate matter.
And President, going back to Next Generation EU, some would argue the verdict on it will really matter to dictate whether it can be replicated in the future. Looking back, you think it will be a positive verdict, or it would be a verdict of it did save Europe in the pandemic, but it could have been done better?
Oh, everything could be done better. But perfection is not of this world. I think it's from how we look at it from a macroeconomic point of view, it has been a clear impulse for additional growth and focused projects. Now, this is not my remit. It's not for me to, sort of have a view on the appropriateness, the perfect target and all that. This is, more the business of the Commission. But when I look at the macroeconomic impact, of course it has had an impact on growth of GDP in Europe, for sure.
And Commissioner, to that extent, this is a big debate, certainly in this audience. Will there be a sort of continuation? And ultimately, it's the question of safe asset inevitable, whether you call it one thing or another.
Yeah, first of all, maybe on this MFF proposal and the repayments of this next generation EU loans. So indeed, we followed what was agreed among the member states that we need to start repayments already during this MFF and then go into the next one. And into the next one, our proposal is basically repayments of 24 billion euros per year in current prices. And we know that this is one of the elements in discussion. So I was mentioning the position of the Council, where the debate is, in a sense, how to cut our proposal. Mm-hmm. The debate in Parliament goes opposite direction, and in a sense, kind of the thinking is that yes to the size of Commission's proposal, except that the 24 billion should be moved on top of the 2 trillion which we have proposed, not as part of it, or some rolling over mechanism for this next generation EU debt. So on this specific point, there is going to be a discussion among member states and European Parliament. On kind of this question of safe asset or European common borrowing, well, as you see, we now have several instruments which are based on common European borrowing. It includes, of course, Next Generation EU by far the largest, but also SAFE, also Ukraine support loan now. We have foreseen possibility for this common borrowing also in the next MFF, but as a possibility to respond to certain crises, because everything we had to decide during the current MFF was on ad hoc basis. So there was a crisis. We had to invent an instrument, have debates with member states and parliament whether it can be financed by common borrowing, which were not easy at all. And so on. So now we foresee this possibility. We don't know, what kind of crisis may come, but we foresee the possibility to use the option of common borrowing as a response to that crisis.
That's what the French president says. There's a big political debate each time, but he says de facto it's already happening. So it's difficult to see why it triggers so many emotions. Emmanuel Macron has said this multiple times. The fact it's already happening. A quick word on this, did you?
Yeah, no, and he's right, actually. I mean, if you compare the budget of the Union with the size of our economy and with the need of investing in different parts of our economy, but also with the geopolitical tensions, we can see the budget is far too small. And even if the German chancellor, my chancellor if you want, doesn't understand that and fights for a smaller budget and heavy cuts, that's the situation we are in right now. And I think that the head of governments back in the COVID pandemic took a very, very smart decision by by agreeing on the next generation proposal you worked on and proposed as Commission back in the days. And looking on where we are economically right now, I think now providing cuts to the budget is not really smart. We need to cut some parts of the budget, but in general, with the overall size, I really think we need to move forward and we need to see a bit bolder approach than what I think the head of governments are discussing right now. To be very honest about that, and part of that, of course, is common borrowing, or could be common borrowing, but especially also the debate on own resources, also to become a bit more sovereign when it comes to budget issues, is a very important part. And there we can see that the Commission proposed, I think, a very good first step. But now the member states. Some member states are moving back, and they are basically or mostly explaining what should not be part of that proposal, and they can't provide any kind of alternatives. And this, I think, is a very important problem. So we need to see some more action there, and if we cannot agree on more common borrowing activities, then I think we should at least move ahead on the own resources issue. And there, I think, also the Parliament put forward some proposals we could agree on, like, for example, a tax on the big tech giants, for example, or a tax on capital gains on cryptocurrencies and so on. So there are some more proposals we could work on, but it's up to the member states to put some alternatives forward and not just to shut some of them down.
Now you're opening a whole different,
but it's
stay.
Part of the topic.
Indeed. There's another question. Yes.
Good afternoon, Jorge Valero with Bloomberg. Coming back to your Chancellor, Merz said last week after the summit, the discussion on the imbalances on China, he called for international talks on the exchange rates. He had in mind the Plaza Accord of nearly 40 years ago. So my question is for both of you, Ms. Lagarde and Mr. Dombrovskis, if you would support such talks, if you think that they are necessary to address the undervaluation of some currencies.
I would give you two elements. One is the Plaza Accord, where times were different. We are now in a vastly different situation, number one. Number two, there are some terribly competent institutions, including in particular the International Monetary Fund, that produce diligently, very carefully, in a very analytical way and on a very comprehensive basis, the analysis of where currencies are underappreciated, where currencies are overappreciated. And it's a fact, I think, and this is certainly the case in their latest publication, that the renminbi, according to the IMF, okay, so it's the IMF speaking here, not me. I'm no longer the IMF. The IMF is considering that there is an underappreciation of the renminbi by a magnitude of about 15 or 16%. So that's the situation as it is, which, justifies completely the fact that there has been, and I hope there will be, further discussions of excessive imbalances, which include a currency aspect to it, between the G7 leaders and beyond those who are party to this excessive imbalances, and that requires that China be also at the table in order to address these matters. The work that has been done under the leadership of Hélène Rey, the work done by the IMF are two important pieces of work that really warrant further debate, in my view.
And it's not just the Europeans that came up in the G7, it's the IMF. It's clearly a conversation extending beyond Europe.
Well, the Treasury Department also has a review of the under and over valuations.
Yeah, just to complement very briefly, indeed, so it's part of this discussion on global macroeconomic imbalances. So this IMF reports President Lagarde was referring to actually provide an analytical underpinning of those discussions in terms of policy response that will still require further discussions, not only specifically on currency point, but also on more general policy response. And there's a point which we are making is, in a sense, also if we discuss specifically situation in China and so, that at the end of the day, this global economic rebalancing is a growth agenda for all. So it's something which will allow for, in a sense, better global economic development without further proliferation of trade barriers and so on. Because the problem is that if current imbalances will be persisting, we'll be seeing more and more trade barriers or other types of barriers where different countries or economic blocs will be trying to address the issues by so to say, the means they have, and it is not going to be good for global economic growth, and at the end of the day, is going to hurt all major economic blocs and also other countries. And there is also like IMF analysis already some time ago regarding this. So what happens if this global economic fragmentation is taking place, like trade broadly concentrating among certain geopolitical blocs? And the assessment is that over the kind of medium to longer term, it means 7% smaller global GDP. So that's very substantial negative economic effect, which will be felt by everyone. So that's something we also need to keep in mind in these debates on global economic imbalances, and not to see it just as a zero-sum game, but how do we ensure that it's a growth agenda for all?
And the Europeans want a fair deal, and it's legitimate to want a fair deal.
Exactly.
And on that note, well, okay, final one, quickly perhaps.
We're dying of heat.
But
Was it me?
yes, maybe we round them up and then...
Well, I wanted to take the advantage of the opportunity of having the Commissioner and President Lagarde here, because you have stated very different opinions on European macroeconomy, on whether we are in a stagflation point or not. I know the Commissioner has talked about that used that word several times, and that Madame Lagarde does not like at all the word stagflation. I would like to know where we are, and if you have discussed in between your different points of view.
And you're a research analyst? No. Or a journalist?
A journalist.
Ha, 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 ha. Of course.
I'm a research analyst, St. Jordan, Sustainable Finance Lab. Maybe just to come back on the issue of self-assets, which I think is, as you said, Madame Lagarde, is the core of the issue for the global euro. I mean, I hear, we have this debate for more than 10 years now on the Eurobonds and everything. There's one view that says, let's do it because it's, in a way, it's plumbing, financial plumbing, and then we can move forward. The other view says, no, we need to reinforce the fundamentals before we can actually deserve such a safe asset. I mean, how do you stand on this? I mean, do you think the safe assets makes us stronger to actually improve the fundamentals? Or do we really, what would happen if we don't have stronger fundamentals and yet we do the safe asset? What is the risk-benefit analysis here? And for example, I'd like the Commission to evaluate, how much would be the convenience yield, Mr. Valdis Dombrovskis. I mean, you talked already about the fragmentation, not only of national markets for savings and investment, but also the fragmentation of our own EU policy instruments. If we merge all of that, and if, by the way, we bring the ESM back to EU law as was agreed by the leaders at the time, how much we would win from the yields, that would presumably go lower. Are there any economic studies that you have done on this? Thank you.
Over to you. Eh?
Yeah. Okay. Coming to the first point. So the point, indeed, I had been repeatedly making, and there is a small nuance that European economy is facing stagflationary shock. Mm-hmm. Not that European economy is in stagflation.
That's true.
And I would say that has been very much confirmed by our spring economic forecast, where to compare with our previous economic forecast, which was pre-war in Iran, growth rates we had to revise downward, and inflation rate we had to revise upward. So we saw this stagflationary shock. But at the same time, we see that economic growth in the EU is continuing. And we're also looking at, so to say, the policy response, how to make sure that EU economy is resilient in the face of the shock. And we already see that the many measures which we took since the previous energy crisis in 2022-23 are helping us now, because we already reduced our dependency from imported fossil fuels, which is again the source of this economic shock. So that's on this stagflationary shock part. Well, on safe assets, obviously there had been different studies and different scenarios and models presented, how it could work, and so I think the main issue here is not that we are short of kind of economic analysis or study papers on also possible designs of safe assets and so, The problem here is more the politics and how much we are able to realistically go in this area, because we know that the views of member states are very divided on this particular topic. But in a sense, step by step, we see that we are having more those common borrowing instruments.
And Madame Lagarde, as it is the House of the Euro, final quick word before we come to an end.
I don't want to disappoint my friend over there, the journalist. So I agree with a lot of what Valdis has said, and I just want to explain to you why I have said that we were not in a stagflation situation. And the reason I say that is that, number one, the word and the concept of stagflation is associated very much with the 70s. And I don't think that we are in the 70s situation for two reasons, and I oversimplify. One is we do not have the unemployment and the degraded labor market that we had at the time in the 70s. Point number one. Point number two, the monetary policy decisions that were made at the time did not respond to the challenge, and as a result did not bring inflation down. My natural expectations, and I hope that of all those who observe how we at the ECB respond, is that we will, come what may, take the right decisions in order to avoid inflation and to avoid that inflation gets embedded. Hence, we will not find ourselves in a stagflation situation. Having said that, as you know, we have modified our projections, and we know that in terms of balance of risks are to the downside on GDP and risk are to the upside on inflation. So that you have pretty much, in essence, the three main points that justify that I say this is not a stagflation as understood at the time.
Well, on that note, thank you to President Lagarde, thank you to Commissioner Dombrovskis, and of course thank you, MEP Anderson, for joining us for this panel, and good luck with the vote tomorrow in this session. As always, thank you so much to the House of the Year for putting it together. Thanks very much.
A visit to the United Nations World Food Programme headquarters on Monday. Speaking in Rome, the pontiff strongly denounced complex political decisions and skewed ideological positions that create numerous administrative barriers to humanitarian assistance while allowing weaponry to pass unhindered.
To strengthen solidarity, in this spirit, I wish to appeal to the governments and peoples of the world to renew and strengthen their commitment, to increase the resources dedicated to combating hunger and its root causes, and to remove the obstacles that prevent aid from reaching those in need.
The Pope also stressed that this operational imbalance represents a severe breakdown in moral priorities, noting that chronic hunger actively erodes social cohesion and accelerates forced global migration. The pontiff also reiterated that access to essential nourishment, water and healthcare must never be subordinated to market commodities or volatile geopolitical interests. While praising the international organization for its dedicated commitment during natural disasters, he urged global leaders to place human dignity above market profit to ensure international stability.
Far-right candidate Abelardo de la Espriella, who was endorsed by U.S. President Donald Trump, narrowly won Colombia's presidential election. De la Espriella, a lawyer and business owner, had never run for office before. He won from progressive lawmaker Ivan Cepeda. The win is expected to usher in policies that will reverse the agenda of outgoing President Gustavo Petro, plans Cepeda had pledged to push forward if he won.
Que marca el inicio de una nueva historia para la nación. La noche en la que empieza una nueva era, un cambio de orden. La patria, milagro.
Acaba de ganar la democracia, acaba de ganar Abelardo de la Espriella, una fórmula absolutamente democrática que tiene todo por sacar adelante a nuestro país después de 4 años muy complejos, muy difíciles.
However, many Colombians vowed resistance to the right-wing rule, with thousands of leftist demonstrators coming to the streets of Cali and Bogota on Sunday.
Que elijan la guerra, la destrucción de nuestro país y no muchas oportunidades como el continuismo con Cepeda.
In Cali, Colombia's third largest city, clashes broke out between police and protesters. Demonstrators burned U.S. flags while police used tear gas to break up crowds.
China has imposed export controls on 10 American companies involved in defense, aerospace and rare earth mining in response to Washington's decision to expand a blacklist of Chinese firms it says have links to the country's military. The measures were announced on Monday by China's Commerce Ministry, which said Chinese exporters would be prohibited from supplying dual-use items to the listed entities. Dual-use goods are products that can have both civilian and military applications. The sanctions come a month after US President Donald Trump visited Beijing for talks with Chinese President Xi Jinping, aimed at stabilizing relations between the world's two largest economies. Although both sides agreed to work towards reducing tariffs, tensions have since resurfaced over technology and defense. Earlier this month, the US Defense Department added several major Chinese companies, including Alibaba, Baidu and BYD, to a list of firms it says have links to the Chinese military. The designation prevents them from receiving US military contracts.
Europe Today, your new morning show live from Brussels. The news and insights that drive Europe. Weekday mornings. It's been 10 years since the referendum that saw the UK narrowly vote to leave the EU. And while the time may have flown by, some of the conflicting claims about whether Brexit would be a benefit or a disaster for the country have not. Let's have a look at two of the biggest points of contention during the campaign and how they hold up today. Remainers argue that leaving the EU would harm the UK's economy. The overwhelming consensus from researchers and government institutions is that this has been the case. The UK's own Office for Budget Responsibility has said that the country's productivity is down 4%, the UK's EU exports and imports will be 15% lower in the long run, and that new trade deals with non-EU countries haven't had a significant impact.
Brexit has definitely harmed the UK economy, and it's done so very badly. Even many Brexiters would recognise that, although they say it's the price worth paying. Core estimates range from the UK being 4% poorer than it otherwise would be because of Brexit to 8% poorer.
A major claim made by the Leave campaign was that Brexit would allow the UK to better control its borders and so drive down immigration. Immigration from the EU did fall dramatically as freedom of movement ended, but figures from outside the bloc rose, taking immigration levels to record numbers in 2023.
Now that wasn't just because of Brexit, because most other European countries also saw significant increases in immigration from outside the EU after the pandemic as a consequence of the labour shortages. Overall, the increase in non-EU immigration more than offset the decrease in EU immigration.
Claims on immigration and the economy were some of the biggest drivers of the Brexit vote. And while some may think any negative effects of Brexit were worth it, polls show that most Brits think it has gone badly, and expert opinion and official statistics seem to back that up.
What are Europe's new cocaine capitals? Cocaine is the most widely used illegal drug in Europe after cannabis. In a new report by EUDA, the EU's drugs agency, Norway and the Netherlands showed the highest consumption rates. At least 2.9% of adults in those countries took cocaine in the last 12 months before the study was finalized. France came next with 2.7%, followed by Spain and Ireland. The rates are significantly higher among younger people aged between 15 and 34. Norway and the Netherlands came out on top again, followed by Ireland. Bear in mind that these percentages are purely based on survey answers. When looking at cocaine residues in wastewater, the picture shifts a bit. The highest levels were mostly recorded in Spanish and Belgian cities: Lleida, Antwerp, Granada, and then Amsterdam, Liège, and Brussels. Wastewater data also reveals where cocaine use is rising fastest. Spain's the main hotspot at the moment. Barcelona and Lleida saw the steepest rise in Europe in both percentage and absolute terms. Elsewhere, Slovenia also had a sharp increase in absolute terms, particularly around the towns of Velenje, Domžale and Kamnik. Denmark is another growing cluster, with levels increasingly high in Esbjerg, Aalborg and Copenhagen.
Euronews. The headlines.
Peace negotiations between the United States and Iran have concluded on a positive note, Pakistani Prime Minister said on Monday.
British Prime Minister Keir Starmer announced he will step down as leader of the Labour Party on Monday, bowing to mounting internal pressure following a bruising round of local elections.
Spain's Supreme Court has sentenced ex-Transport Minister José Luis Ábalos to 24 years in jail in a COVID corruption case.
During his visit to the United Nations World Food Programme headquarters, Pope Leo urged world leaders to feed people in need instead of conflicts.
Schokolade essen und damit den Planeten retten, das gibt es wirklich. Eine junge Unternehmerin aus Bayern hat nachhaltige Schokolade aus Sonnenblumenkernen entwickelt, ganz ohne Kakaobohnen. Das führt dazu, dass die Transportwege kürzer werden und die Ökobilanz besser. Made in Europe, jetzt gleich bei uns auf Sendung.
Hallo, schön Sie zu treffen.
Schönen guten Morgen, ich nehme Sie gleich mal mit.
Ja, super, ich bin neugierig.
Klasse.
Jede Menge Auszeichnungen für Sarah Marquardt und ihren Bruder Maximilian. Das von ihnen gegründete Start-up Planet A Foods revolutioniert die Süßwarenindustrie. Hier in einem unscheinbaren Industriegebiet im Süden Deutschlands entwickelt Sarah ein Patent nach dem anderen. Heute wird zusammen mit Chefkoch Lukas ein neues Rezept für die Schokoladenalternative Joviva ausprobiert.
Dann haben wir jetzt hier unsere Zutaten für die Joviva. Einmal unser Konzentrat, das aus Pilsen kommt, wo unsere Fabrik ist, in der Tschechischen Republik. Und genau, das besteht hauptsächlich aus den Sonnenblumenkernen. Noch Zucker hier und unser Pflanzenfett, das wir gleich benutzen werden. Dann haben wir jetzt hier unsere verwalzte, aber noch nicht konchierte Joviva-Masse und die geben wir jetzt in die Conche, um sie zu verflüssigen, damit schön zarte, flüssige, leckere Joviva rauskommt. Die Joviva ist konchiert worden und jetzt können wir die flüssige Joviva uns hier rausziehen. Da drehe ich an dem Rad und dann kommt es gleich raus. Gut, dann haben wir jetzt hier unsere Joviva von vorhin. Wir temperieren die Masse, um das Fett in die richtige Konfiguration zu bekommen. Das heißt, die Kristalle sind einer festen Struktur und nach dem Abkühlen im Kühlschrank hat man ein Produkt, das einen schönen Glanz hat und knackige Textur hat. Jetzt schlagen wir die Luftblasen noch kurz raus.
Gegründet wurde das Start-up 2021. Planet A Foods beschäftigt Forscher und Techniker aus 18 Ländern. Arbeitssprache ist meist Englisch. Schauen wir nochmal bei Lukas im Labor vorbei.
So, jetzt haben wir unsere Joviva aus dem Kühlschrank geholt. Die Kristalle sind fest geworden in der Struktur und jetzt können wir es einmal ausschlagen und gucken, wie es schmeckt. Perfekter Snap. Und jetzt das Wichtigste natürlich probieren. Schön zart schmelzend, fester Biss und ein tolles Aroma.
Warum Sonnenblumenkerne statt Kakaobohnen? Kaffeepause mit Start-up-Gründerin Marquardt.
Das ist ein riesiges Abenteuer. Wer hat denn das eigentlich angefangen?
Da gibt es ein Szenario, dass irgendwie 2050
50% des Kakaos wegfallen. Und das war so der Startgedanke. Da muss man verstehen, dass Kakao aus 2 Ländern kommt. Ghana, Elfenbeinküste, 80% des weltweit konsumierten Kakaos kommen aus diesen beiden Ländern. Und das in Regionen, die sehr vom Klimawandel betroffen sind. Und das heißt, es regnet zur falschen Zeit, es ist trocken zur falschen Zeit. Das führt dazu, dass Kakaoanbau nicht mehr möglich ist.
War das schon immer Ihr Mädchentraum, dass Sie sich gedacht haben, wenn ich mal groß bin, bin ich die Königin eines Schoko-Imperiums?
Unsere Großeltern, die einen kamen aus der Lebensmittelindustrie, die anderen hatten einen Bauernhof. Das heißt also, Lebensmittel war immer wichtig für mich. Ich habe mal eine Doktorarbeit geschrieben über die Aromen- und Geschmacksstoffbildung bei Röstkaffee. Da habe ich zum ersten Mal verstanden, dass die Verarbeitung ist das A und O dafür, dass ein Lebensmittel richtig gut schmeckt.
Machen Sie eine sinnvolle Arbeit?
Unser Produkt spart 80% CO2 ein. Das heißt, das treibt uns an. Ökologische Themen sind der Motor für die Firma.
Meine Reportagereise führt mich weiter in das Elsass nach Frankreich.
Bonjour. Bienvenue à la Chocolaterie Apté, on est ravis de vous accueillir.
Der mittelständische Familienbetrieb war das erste französische Unternehmen, das einen Teil der Produktion auf die Schokoladenalternative Chaux-Viva umgestellt hat. Das brachte Wachstum und schuf Arbeitsplätze. Der Jahresumsatz stieg auf 21 Millionen Euro. Exportiert wird in 47 Länder auf der ganzen Welt.
Nous sommes une PME familiale. Historiquement, on a toujours travaillé que pour Noël et que pour Pâques, qui étaient nos 2 grands temps forts de l'année. Et aujourd'hui, grâce à Chaux-Viva, ça nous a ouvert de nouveaux marchés qui nous permettent de travailler en permanence tout au long de l'année. Il a fallu adapter cette nouvelle matière Chaux-Viva à notre process de production. C'était un pari un peu risqué, audacieux, parce que nos machines jusqu'à présent n'utilisaient que du chocolat. Et je ne voulais absolument pas investir sur de nouvelles machines parce que ça aurait été trop risqué pour nous. Donc on a travaillé pendant 9 mois avec Planet Food pour adapter la rhéologie à nos machines.
Auch Wagner-Abteis Tochter Elena arbeitet bereits im Unternehmen. Wenn die Kinder eines Tages übernehmen, wird die traditionsreiche Schokofirma in 4. Generation von der Familie gemanagt.
Vous avez amené un album photo, si je comprends bien. Ce sont des photos de vos grands-parents?
C'est l'histoire de la chocolaterie, donc 80 ans d'histoire. Et on voit mon grand-père qui a fait son brevet de maîtrise en chocolaterie, la première installation dans la cave de sa maison, les premières machines. Et puis ce duo fantastique avec ma grand-mère. Et aujourd'hui, je suis très fière de ce cadeau qu'ils m'ont laissé et j'essaye d'en prendre soin.
Vous avez vécu une grande crise de chocolat, une grande crise de cacao. Comment s'en sortir?
La crise du cacao qui a démarré en janvier 2024, c'était particulièrement anxiogène pour nous parce qu'on nous a parlé de pénurie de cacao. Et moi, si j'ai plus de cacao, qu'est-ce que je fais? Qu'est-ce que je mets sur mes machines? Et en janvier 2024, on a eu la chance de rencontrer la start-up Planet Foods lors d'un salon. Et on s'est dit que peut-être là, on avait une solution à la crise du cacao, une solution qui soit aussi en accord avec nos valeurs. On va continuer à faire du chocolat, la recette de mon grand-père, mais il est important pour nous aussi de venir avec des alternatives qui aient du sens, qui soient bonnes, gourmandes, mais également écologiques, donc bonnes pour la planète.
Zurück nach Deutschland, zurück nach Bayern. Start-up-Manager Marquardt kauft mit einer Kollegin kiloweise knackige Kekse, um zu überprüfen, ob die Qualität stimmt, auch im Regal. Planet A Food produziert 10.000 Tonnen Chaux-Viva im Jahr. Süßwarenproduzenten in ganz Europa, darunter auch bekannte Großkonzerne, sind ganz wild auf den Schokoladenersatz.
In den letzten Jahren ist es tatsächlich so, dass der Kakaopreis 2-, 3-mal, 4-mal so teuer war. Ich glaube, wir haben es im Geldbeutel gemerkt. Da ist eine Alternative wie Chaux-Viva einfach auch günstiger.
Was bringt die Zukunft? Wohin geht die Reise?
Wir wollen Schokolade zukunftssicher machen. Und zwar, indem wir das regional, lokal in Europa produzieren mit Zutaten aus Europa. Deswegen ist unsere Vision und Mission ein fester Bestandteil der Schokoladenwelt von morgen zu werden und es möglich zu machen, dass unsere Kinder, unsere Kindeskinder Schokolade genießen können.
decision making is crucial in businesses.
The cloud spending will surpass the $1 trillion mark in Europe.
You have to love the problem.
Making equity great again.
I don't believe in digitalizing for the sake of digitalization.
AI is a new power, a new capability.
We speak to some of the brightest minds in industry to address the key topics on the business agenda.
Welcome to Kyrgyzstan, a land with nature beyond your imagination, where the old embraces the new. Independent for 35 years, and we're rapidly transforming, where extraordinary people live, and everyone is welcome. Visit, invest, explore, Kyrgyzstan beyond.
When it drives you to give your best, then it's love. It's Grana Padano. It's the Italian cheese that has captured the world. Grana Padano, an Italian feeling.
This is a new era for Europeans, an era of interconnection, where geopolitics and economy are inseparable.
We can reach our climate targets. All the countries should believe that this is achievable.
Innovation meets disruption, and uncertainty meets never-ending opportunities.
The most brilliant minds in business.
From the Eurozone's diverse economies to its emerging startups.
Station F is the world's biggest startup campus based in central Paris.
Get the latest news and analysis on Europe's economy, business, and markets. See the big picture.
Thanks for being on the show.
Euronews Business.
Discover the Euronews app. Stay connected anytime, anywhere. Get the latest news in video. Download the Euronews app.
From the Eurozone's diverse economies to its emerging startups, get the latest news and analysis on Europe's economy, business, and markets. See the big picture. Euronews Business.
Can faith, education, and technology work together to empower the next generation? From Kuala Lumpur, religious leaders and young voices discuss coexistence, identity, AI, and the future of youth. This week on Focus.
Euronews. European weather.
Your next news bulletin on Euronews is coming up in under 1 minute.
good at what's important to you.
Euronews. The news.
Peace negotiations between Iran and the United States have concluded on a positive note, Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif said on Monday. The talks took place in a positive and constructive atmosphere and resulted in encouraging progress, including an agreement on a roadmap leading to a final deal within 60 days, he said in a message posted on X. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi wrote on X that tireless Pakistani and Qatari mediation has delivered major progress to end Lebanon war. He said the first real test of negotiations would be whether the deconfliction cell succeeded in halting the fighting in Lebanon. Lower-level talks are planned for the rest of the week as Iran and the United States agreed to create a deconfliction cell to address the fighting in Lebanon. It still remains unclear whether that will be enough to stop fighting between the Iran-backed Hezbollah and Israel, which occupies Lebanon and insists it must maintain a free hand to attack militants who are launching attacks into northern Israel. This remains one of the key sticking points in the agreement, as Iran moved to link the ongoing hostilities in Lebanon as a major component of any ceasefire deal it secures with the US.
British Prime Minister Keir Starmer announced he will step down as leader of the Labour Party on Monday, bowing to mounting internal pressure following a bruising round of local elections. Delivering an emotional speech outside 10 Downing Street, Starmer confirmed he accepts the party's decision with good grace and will remain as caretaker Prime Minister until a successor is chosen in September.
And when I leave the biggest job in the country, I shall spend more time on the most important job, being the best husband I can to my fantastic wife Vic, who has been a rock by my side through good times and bad, and being the best dad I can to my beautiful children, who are my pride and my joy. Thank you very much.
The dramatic downfall was triggered after former Greater Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham won a crucial by-election in Makerfield, gaining a seat in the House of Commons and positioning himself as the favourite to take power.
Score two down here. The other.
To Andy Burnham, member for Makerfield.
After being sworn in as a Member of Parliament for Makerfield, Burnham called for orderly and responsible transition, declaring on social media that he will seek to replace Starmer as Prime Minister. Responding to the resignation, hard-right Reform UK leader Nigel Farage demanded an immediate general election, insisting that the British public will not accept another professional politician being pushed into office.
They had the courage.
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen praised Starmer for his statesmanship, noting his work in strengthening continental and Ukrainian security during his 2 years in office. The impending transition will see the United Kingdom appoint its 7th Prime Minister in just 10 years, highlighting a decade of intense political volatility across Westminster.
Spain's Supreme Court has sentenced ex-Transport Minister José Luis Ábalos to 24 years in prison for corruption. Ábalos was once a senior figure